Hello everyone and welcome to the Grand Multilingual event. This is the second interview on Translanguaging. When preparing this event, several teachers reached out to me telling me that they saw the importance of Translanguaging, they were implementing this practice in their classes and knew that it would benefit the students to have it more spread out in the whole of the school, but they didn't know how to do it. And to help us see how we can navigate this challenge, we have two teachers from South Saigon International School, Lindsay Manzella and Catherine McDougall. The typical challenges we face when trying to implement Translanguaging or any other new practice at the whole school level are for teachers to have the time to dedicate for this new classroom practice and for all teachers to be on board with it. During this interview, you hear from Catherine and Lindsay that they didn't face many pushbacks and that they didn't face that many challenges, but that's because of what was implemented beforehand and how things were planned out. I'll let you discover all of this in this interview, but before we start, I would like to clarify what the MLRC is. They have mentioned it several times in this interview. It's the Multilingual Learning Research Center. It's an organization that helps schools develop and work on action research projects that aim to improve multilingual learners' education. So I'll leave the link of their website in the description below. And during this interview, Lindsay and Catherine also mentioned that they attended a 2-day symposium. If you would like to attend one as well, I'm going to let you check the details of when and where they happen in the link in the description below. And now, without further ado, let's get to this interview. Hello, Catherine and Lindsay. Thank you very much for being with us. For the Grand Multiliteracy event, there were many teachers who asked to learn more about Translanguaging, and some teachers told me that they saw the value of Translanguaging and they were convinced that it would be better, it would be more beneficial if it was spread out to the whole school where every teacher was aware of it and was using these practices, but they were not really sure how to go about it. So I understand that at South Saigon International School, you're already on this path and you're successfully spreading this practice to the whole school. So during this interview, I would love to go over what happened, what you did, and what's going on at the moment. So thank you very much again for accepting my invitation and welcome to the interview.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And so, Catherine, you have just changed school, but when you were at South Saigon International School, what role did you have?
I was the grade 3 EAL teacher. So I worked with all grade 3 students. There were approximately 110, and that was across 5 classes.
Okay, thank you. And Lindsay, you're still in this school. Could you let us know what's your role?
Yeah, so it's Saigon South International School, and I'm in grade 5 EAL, and I have 6 classes in my grade level.
Okay, thank you very much. And can you tell us a bit about the context of your school? So how many languages are spoken roughly by students, the percentage of students who speak better their home language than English, and maybe there are also some monolingual English students as well. So what's the percentage of these students?
Yeah, so I looked into this. I can't tell you like exact numbers, but Catherine, you can correct me if you notice anything wrong. But I think we have probably like 90% of the population are multilingual speakers in some way. And then if you also consider that our so-called monolingual speakers are also learning Vietnamese host culture language, all of them are multilingual in some way. And that's kind of how we like to think of them. Some of the dominant languages for our school are obviously Vietnamese, the host country language, Korean, Mandarin, and then we have like kind of like a smattering of all different other languages, and it kind of would vary by grade level, just depending on what students happen to be in the grade level that year.
Okay, thank you very much. And so before we go any further, we're talking about translanguaging, but could you define translanguaging for us?
Sure. So translanguaging is when a speaker deploys their full language repertoire without defined language boundaries, without saying, oh, this language is English and this language is Vietnamese, right? So it's an extension of language where multilingual learners shape knowledge and experience across their multiple languages. Essentially, translanguaging is just an academic term for what's already happening in multilingual people's brains.
Yeah.
Or people who are learning or using more than one language, right? So those languages and their words and structures, they don't exist in like separate file folders in your brain, right? Rather, they're kind of like connections across language structures and vocabulary and syntax, kind of like a web of crossed threads. And if a person is asked to separate one language out of the others and not use those connections, not only does that language not work like that in the human brain, but the act of trying to turn off part of that brain can really limit your understanding and your ability to communicate. So on the other hand, translanguaging pedagogy encourages students to use everything at their disposal, all their languages, all their prior knowledge, their skills for making meaning to understand new information, which in the case of our school is most often presented in English.
Okay.
And I like
I
what
guess,
Catherine said there, about how it's just kind of a natural part of how they would use their thinking and their language and their brains anyways. As I was just reading a book this afternoon, kind of looking through the introduction, and I saw a part where they'd explained translanguaging, and they were explaining it really as kind of like a crutch or a support for students who were still building their use and knowledge of English. And that's really not what it is and not how we think about it at all.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really like when two multilingual people speak. Like, for example, I'm in England. I'm a French teacher with my French colleagues. We often mix when we talk about, I don't know, marking copies, etc. We mix some English and French. And like you said, it's like a crutch. Instead of trying to find the word, for example, if we're talking in English, just keep everything in English. It keeps the conversation flow better, and maybe we're more precise because we can use certain terms that are more understandable than others.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And like you said, it's something that happens naturally in groups of multilingual people. It's something that happens naturally in multilingual people's brains when they're thinking, right? You're not segregating your words into these categories of, you're trying to express a concept, and that concept may be better expressed in one language than another.
Yeah, thank you. And so you are in the process of implementing translanguaging as a regular practice in every class in your school. And I imagine that it started with one or few teachers learning about this way of teaching and maybe trying it in their lessons, and then thinking that it might be good to spread it to every lesson. Is that how it happened? Or how did this all happen in your school?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because what really happened, at least the way that I remember it happening, keep in mind that, I was at the school for 3 years, so I'm sure there were things that happened before I got there. But the way that I remember it is I was using translanguaging in my grade 3 classes because it is something that I brought with me from the United States, where I used it regularly with my students in public schools. And it was something that it turns out our EAL coordinator, Ceci Gomez-Galvez, who is a frequent speaker in the international school circuit on things like translanguaging and language equity, she of course, was a big proponent of this. So we started developing a culture in our EAL team about sharing our practices. And then we realized that a lot of us were doing some version of translanguaging separately without having talked to each other about it. So as we started realizing that there were these little pockets of translanguaging, both intentional and spontaneous, we started talking about it more as a regular practice. And then the MLRC Action Research Project was something that our school wanted to work with. And it's one of the things that we considered as a possibility. So it was happening. It just wasn't as
Coordinated or organized.
Coordinated. Yeah, it wasn't as coordinated. We were all kind of doing our own version of it. And it really was just one of a variety of topics that we considered. But because it was something that we all felt like we were ready to kind of take to the next level with our teams and with specialists, it ended up winning out.
Okay.
And the topic specifically that we ended up choosing, we had to choose a research question that we wanted to do for our action research project. Because of that it was already happening here and there. We weren't trying to like gauge teacher interest in it because we knew many teachers were interested, and
Yeah.
you know, we could have written the question in many different ways, but our idea was to look at what would happen if we intentionally planned for translanguaging. So it was happening a lot of times spontaneously, or different teachers might have known about it, and on the spot they would think, oh, here's a moment where I could just ask my students to translate in their language, or okay, go ahead, you can write in any language. But we thought, well, what if we were a little bit more intentional, and we tried to bring that planning for translanguaging into lesson planning, unit design, and kind of like, it wasn't standardized other than we were trying to bring it to the forefront and do it more often.
Okay. So being part of the MLRC, like doing it as an action research project, helped you coordinate things throughout the school. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having to go through the process of the action research really made us think about the implementation. We had to document all of that in a way that we might not have been as intentional about without the action research format, right? That
Okay.
process that we were going through. So action research, of course, is a tried and true method for teachers who want to improve their practice. And if you want to improve your practice with multilingual learners in mind, translanguaging action research makes a lot of sense.
And I would say also that the fact that we were doing this work as part of the MLRC, as part of an action research project, to me, it felt like it gave our work a little bit more weight in what we were doing at the school. So it gave us that, you know, kind of space to ask for time at a full faculty meeting. So those times are always limited. So we were able to get time like that. We were able to say, hey, we're doing this as part of an action research project. You know, we want participants from all different areas of the school. And without that, it might have continued on for a long time with what Catherine was saying, us talking about it in our teams, in our EAL team, and then trying to bring it to our individual teams, which we did still continue to do, but it kind of gave it this weight that made it like, okay, this is something our whole school is doing. It's important. We want everybody on board. And then, you know, even today in our team meeting, we were talking a little, well, how are we going to continue this forward? And we're able to still use, okay, well, we already did this whole project. How can we keep it going? And just, it continues to kind of give our work that importance that it might not without the project.
Yeah, I guess as teachers, we always have so many things to do that if we don't have something to justify taking time from each teacher, it won't really happen. So yeah, I understand how useful it can be to have like the MLRC or something else to justify this time we're taking. And so you talked about the fact that it was before it wasn't really coordinated. Everyone was doing a bit what they found natural to do. Through this action research, how have things changed? Maybe just for you or for colleagues, do you have anything you can tell us? Like maybe some people were doing this before, now they've implemented this instead.
Well, I think because the implementation stage, I think we went from like March until May. And so we kind of had this concentrated time where we had it on our minds all that time. We were always thinking about it. And even, you know, with the teams I worked with prior, I did translanguaging with them. I tried to bring it to the work I did, but, you know, sometimes I would forget or I would let it slip. But in that concentrated period of time, we were always thinking about it, always trying to do it. And I think because we used it so much during that time period, it gave us a chance to practice with it, to keep it at the forefront of our teacher's mind, to try more and different strategies than we might not have tried otherwise. And so because people got more used to it, they were able to, you know, get more proficient at using it.
Yeah.
But also just to see the results of, you know, the joy that the kids have when they use it, the engagement. And so it kind of built this momentum for people to want to keep trying it more, whereas doing it a little bit more sporadically wasn't as effective.
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would also like to say that it wasn't just the teachers that developed this expertise with, the strategies and with the concept of translanguaging. It was actually the students as well. Students would start seeing opportunities where they could translanguage when it wasn't actually built intentionally into a particular lesson, and would just start doing it, right? They would have a discussion about a topic, about a reading that they were doing in their science lesson. They would have that discussion for meaning in their home language, and then they would summarize for in English. So it was starting to become something that they felt comfortable doing, switching back and forth and using their entire repertoire, all of the tools at their disposal. Because again, we were showing them so many different ways, and we were being explicit with students. We were explaining the concept of translanguaging, explaining why it's beneficial and how it works in the brain. And those lessons, those discussions really hit home for a lot of students.
Yeah, and I think you just said something that makes me think it's also really important to do, is what you said. You explicitly said to the students, you're doing this for that reason. And I think if you don't say it and you just think, okay, I think it's good to do it that when you start doing it as a teacher, students are they're receiving your teaching, but they don't really reflect on it. But if you tell them that's why I'm doing this, then they start thinking, oh yeah, maybe we can do it that way as well. And they're more active in this respect.
Right. Because, ultimately as educators, we want our students to be metacognitive, right? And translanguaging is a metacognitive strategy. So because you are thinking about your thinking, and you're thinking about which language might be the most effective for whatever purpose you have at the moment. So if you can get kids to pause for a moment and have that internal reflection about what language might be the best to communicate what they're trying to communicate at the time, then that develops really good habits.
Yeah. Thank you very much for mentioning this. It's quite important. And also to clarify, you said you started in March and you finished in May, so it's 3 months?
Yeah, that was the implementation period. So the planning and the getting ready and the surveys and all of that, happened. I think we started in November, and then that was the implementations from March until May. This is when we're going to try to implement planning for translanguaging in all the lessons and units that we can.
Okay. I guess that's also encouraging, because 3 months, if you focus on something for 3 months, it can start new habits, and yes, that's quite positive. And another thing, so we mentioned the action research project, but another thing that's also important to make sure it's implemented in the whole school is having the leadership team on board. So how did it happen in your school? So I'm assuming it came from your department, this idea of translanguaging, and you went to the leadership team, and no,
it was a little different, actually. It was our director of student services who actually wanted to bring the MLRC to our school. And so because it was coming to our school, our whole team signed up to go. And then from there, we had the choice amongst our team. We had translanguaging, collaboration, and I think the other was working with students who are shared between LS, learning support, and EAL, language learners. And so our team decided that we wanted to go with translanguaging.
Okay. Thank you. And so now we'd like to talk about some challenges maybe that you have faced, that I hear some teachers face when they want to implement a new idea, whether it's translanguaging or something else, but it's pushback from other teachers. Like we mentioned before, we're so limited in time because we have to implement so many things. So when we have something like that's new, like translanguaging, it can feel like it's eating up our time, or it's disrupting the way we used to teach. Did you have any pushback from teachers when you started this project?
So surprisingly, not really. I think we were expecting maybe a little more pushback. I would say that, so I actually was one of the teachers who did the long form interviews. And so I actually got to ask teachers a very similar question after they had been working with this for about 2 months. And I would say the biggest concern they had is that they wanted to do more and they just needed to remember to leave time for the students, because often it takes a long time to do a translanguage lesson, because there is a lot of excitement. Everyone wants to share, what it might be in their language. Everyone wants to compare and contrast. So I would say that it was, rather than pushback, it was like, okay, how do I eke out more time to plan for this, to build it into the day? What can I get rid of? And there wasn't a pushback in the sense of, oh, it takes so much time, I don't want to do it. It's, oh, it takes a lot of time. It was all about trying to carve out enough time, because teachers wanted to do it so much, because students wanted to do it so much. And I heard over and over things like, one of the teachers said, how did we ever not do translanguaging, right? When we have nearly 100% of our learners are multilingual. Another teacher said, I just need to make sure that I'm leaving time for the students to process their learning. And as long as I'm doing that, it's going great, right? So it wasn't really a pushback. It was teachers really reflecting on the importance of it and deciding that they needed to make time for it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also didn't have any pushback from my team, and I know that makes it seem like, oh, we have this perfect school, and people might think, oh, at my school there is going to be pushback, but I think what we were asking people to do were really just small bits that they could add into their lesson. So it wasn't like a huge change the way you've always been teaching. It's just little things we showed them. You could add this, and then when you do that with the kids and you see, the reaction that you get from them and how much excitement and joy there is, it makes you want to do it more. So even though like we maybe didn't have pushback, we might have had people who didn't used to make time for it, but then they started to want to make time for it. Or they used to think translanguaging was one thing, and now they realized it's all these other things that it could be too. So there were varying levels of how people started out using translanguaging and how kind of they ended, or how they developed. But we didn't, in our school community, we have people who are mostly, open to collaboration and new ideas, and we have strong, ideas about, letting the kids show their identity and their language. So that was already there. And so this was just kind of developing this one strategy.
That's true. Yeah. Once you have the environment that shows how valuable languages are, it's just a teaching technique. If you don't have this environment, then I guess it becomes more difficult. But if you put in place the right environment, then it probably follows more easily.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. There has been a lot of work done by the faculty through professional development, both in-house and with specialists who have come in terms of being culturally responsive and working on, making sure that we are acknowledging that we live in a multilingual ecosystem, right? That idea of languages existing all around us and not trying to force English to be the only language heard on campus. So we were very fortunate that we had backing from senior leadership all the way, down to building leadership, and that there had already been a significant amount of preparation for that kind of environment.
Yeah. And so just to clarify a bit how things happen, could you detail the different phases of implementing translanguaging into your school, and maybe where you are in these phases?
So We attended the MLRC Research Symposium in November, and during that time we worked on really understanding what an action research project was. We were given access to some recent scholarly literature on translanguaging, which got us started for the literature review that we needed to do. And we learned about some research methods that we could try. Then, once that I think it was a 2-day seminar was over, we had to go back as a team and refine our research question, develop our procedure, do our literature review, just like you would be doing if you were, let's say, in a master's class working on your thesis. We kind of did that whole process as a team. And then, so that took, of course, we're working full time, with our classes and everything. So that did take a while to get all of that work done. And that is why we started in March, right? Because then we had holidays and the Lunar New Year. Yeah. So, March was really the first time that we could implement, a more, consistent and targeted planning for translanguaging, because it was requiring us to increase the documentation of it. So go beyond what we would normally do to document our planning. So we did that for 3 months, really more like 2.5. At the end of that 2.5 month period, I interviewed one teacher, one homeroom teacher, and the EAL teacher from each grade level in a long form interview, which were then transcribed, and they were analyzed. All of the interviews were analyzed by the EAL team. So we were looking for themes, right? Things that we saw across the experiences. And then that basically ended our year, right? So Lindsay, of course, can tell you what's been going on since the beginning of this school year, which has only been a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. And I will say that throughout that whole process that Catherine just described, there were, I would say, like monthly calls with the MLRC where they would do kind of follow-ups, like they would assume you're kind of at such and such stage of the process, and they would do an hour-long call to give you advice on what to do in that stage of the project and have you ask questions. So we had support beyond just the 2-day symposium. But bringing us to this year, so yes, it is the very beginning of the year. We've kind of just come back and started getting settled in. And one of our team kind of like parking lot questions for our EAL department was, what's going to happen with the translanguaging projects. We kind of finished that last year, but of course, this is something that's not just about that project. It's important to us. We want to keep it going. And then we had the chance to discuss it recently at an student support team meeting that we had for the whole school, because our director of student support services was asking us to come up with a goal for the year related to maybe tier 1 instruction or tier 2 kind of support. And so, we thought this is the perfect chance for us to bring back our translanguaging project. And so we thought our goal can be, to continue this work that we've been doing with translanguaging to improve tier 1 instruction or to improve student outcomes through tier 1 instruction. So now,
tier 1, what does tier 1 instruction mean?
So tier 1 means basically your lessons to the whole class. So what you give to the entire class.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna refine kind of exactly what that goal sounds like, but then that kind of again gives us the weight of an important goal that's geared towards our strategic plan that we're gonna then be able to implement for the whole year, work towards that goal. Maybe we can ask for some more time at a faculty meeting where we present the results of what happened at the end of last year with our translanguaging project to offer new PD through that, and then we can keep working on this project. So yeah, I guess this is kind of like phase 2 that we're going to be moving into this year, that the action research project is over, but translanguaging isn't over.
Okay, right. And so between November when you went to the symposium and March when you started having it implemented in the school or tried out in the school, did were you two involved in training the staff or making a presentation of what it can look like in lessons?
So we had our first thing that we did for whole staff, just to kind of get everyone on the page, was our EAL coordinator did a kind of Translanguaging 101 PD to the whole school, just to kind of, the whole elementary school, just to kind of introduce them to the topic and this project we were embarking on. And then we're really fortunate at our school to have a one teacher per grade level EAL model. So because we have one teacher, EAL teacher, who was also working on the project and who was embedded in that grade level team, that kind of gave us the opportunity to talk about it at team meetings. We all do collaboration and co-teaching. So we as the EAL team are inside every single classroom in the elementary school. So we didn't have to like train anybody apart from just our collaboration and co-teaching. So it's like building capacity in the other teachers through our work together. We also all worked on throughout the project adding to a Padlet of translanguaging strategies. We would document what we did in the classroom to share with others. We would add articles or different links that people could access. But I would say most of it happened because we were able to do that work with our teachers that we would normally work with anyways.
Thank you very much. And so we do all of this for the students, obviously. Would you be able to share any anecdotes of that reaction from students? I understand it was very positive from students, but also one concern that some teachers have is, what about the monolingual students? So you said in your context, because it's an English school in Vietnam, so in another country, everyone has at least two languages, so English plus another one. But what was also the reaction from students who mainly speak English at home and in school?
Yeah. So one of the things that I will say about our English, again, we're going to call them monolingual, but they're not really, students, is that they are still learning metalinguistic awareness through this. So even if they weren't taking Vietnamese, the idea of looking at language as something to be studied, right? So something that can be analyzed as an entity rather than just using it for communication really is a great skill that will help them speak academic English better, right? Because academic English is a very particular type of English. It's not the kind of English you're speaking at home with your parents telling them how your day was, right? So this has benefits for all students, regardless of which language they speak. But specifically for our monolingual students, we noticed that there was, we talked about that sense of belonging, right? So the idea that the teachers were welcoming and asking them to utilize their other languages in the classroom definitely created excitement. There was a quote from one of our teachers in the interview. She said, as soon as we use translanguaging strategies, students are immediately excited to get involved and everybody wants to share. So, and I did also notice some teachers intentionally pairing primary English speaking students with students who didn't have another same language peer. For example, there was a student who spoke Portuguese, right? We had one student who spoke Portuguese in third grade. So the teacher decided to pair, instead of having that person work alone, the teacher decided to pair a primary English speaking student with that person, and they both worked on the Portuguese. So the English primary speaker was developing a metalinguistic concept of how the Portuguese language worked, right? While the primary Portuguese speaker was able to be the expert in the language and explain to the other student how the language would work and why they thought that this particular language structure existed. So there are ways that you can do it, and that's not something that I created. That was just a teacher was like, oh, that seems like a good idea, and it turns out it was a great idea.
Yeah, and another example, sometimes we have students who don't necessarily speak another language, but it might be a language that they have in their family, or maybe they're from that country and never learned it. And so they're kind of interested in this language, or they have a connection to it. And so we would often have students when we said, okay, let's translate the patterns of power sentence today. Everybody's going to do it in your home language. And they would just go on Google Translate, and they were super interested to find out, oh, this is how it is in Russian. And I'm going to carefully copy everything down, and they're kind of learning things as they go too. So even if that's why back at the beginning of the interview, I said it's not just only a crutch for learning, but it's for learning English, but it's also you're gaining knowledge in some other way too. So this student was learning some things in Russian that he never knew before, and he's not really a Russian speaker, but it's a family language that he has. He was really interested in it. So some teachers might think of him as a monolingual student, but again, we don't think of them that way because they all have some sort of connection to different languages.
Yeah.
The connection between home and school is often something that is difficult. There are so many things competing for parents' time, right? Often work, they might have other, extended family obligations. They might have just things grabbing at their attention. I find that when students bring home something in their home language and want to talk about it, want to find out more about it, it starts a conversation. Kids will come back in and say, oh, guess what? I took my sentence home, and mom told me that even though this is like the official way to say it, that in her house they would say it this way because it was the regional dialect. So the kids are actually, that school-home connection can really be strengthened, which parents appreciate, right? Because, what's your typical fifth grader going to say when you ask them how they're doing? Oh, it's fine, But if they've got something that can spark a genuine conversation, that's valuable.
I'm just thinking as well, hearing your anecdote, is that there are some parents as well who, for example, when students are in primary school, they can help them with homework, etc. But when they get to secondary school, it becomes more difficult, and they might not know what, for example, I grew up in France. If my son is learning something about British history, I'm not really aware of it, so I don't have much input. But if they're asking me as a parent to give some insights into the French history or something like that, I would be more happy to share it. So it can tighten the links between the families and the school and get them more involved.
Yes, exactly.
And so this interview was for teachers who think that translanguaging could be a good idea and they want to spread it in their school. And they might have picked up quite a few things, but if you had to give an advice to one of these teachers, what would it be?
I kind of liked what you had noted earlier, just that trying something out and being consistent with it for, an intense period of time, even if it's not a long period, can kind of get things going and kind of build that, consistency that you're able to continue it on. And I think also just, don't think about starting it at the whole school level. Start just in your own classroom or with the teachers that you work with, and see if you can't share out the little joys that are happening in your classroom, or, the positive things, because that's contagious and other people want to join in and, have those same results too. So start small. Don't try to think at the whole school level just to begin with.
That's true. Thank you. And
Yeah,
Catherine,
great advice.
Any advice?
The only thing I would add to that is go ahead and take a risk. I think you'll probably be very pleasantly surprised about how the ease of implementation, that was something that the teachers told us consistently in the interviews, was that it was, once they planned for it, actually making it happen in the classroom was really easy. And they found that students were better able to grasp content, that the literacy objectives were much easier when translanguaging was used in the lessons and as part of the classroom culture, and that engagement increased. So it not only helps it doesn't only help with the academic side, it also helps with, the socio-emotional side, and that really creates a positive culture. So spreading joy, that's what Lindsay was talking about. So just give it a try, little bits, and we'd love to hear from you how it works.
Yeah, and I think there is one thing I would like to that I took out of this interview as well, is that if we create this right environment where we value languages, cultures, then the whole process becomes a lot easier, because everyone sees the value in languages and cultures. So if it's a teaching technique, it's just a little tweak, like you were mentioning before. It's not a lot of things that they have to do. It's just small things, small techniques that you can say you can do it that way, that way. Other teachers are going to add their own way of doing things. But yeah, it's important to have this environment already created before you start on like doing anything in the classroom.
Yeah, and just like you said, like a small tweak, like something that any teacher can do tomorrow in their classroom, just ask your students, how would you say that in your language? And it can just be, or do you know how to say this in another language? It doesn't have to be even your language. Do we know how to say this in another language? And start writing it down, keep that up on the board or the bulletin board or wherever it becomes visible in the classroom. Other languages are welcome, and it can grow from there. Just a small question.
Thank you very much. So this was a very interesting interview, and I'm sure people are going to take a lot out of it. So thank you very much for your time and sharing your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. If you'd like to get in touch with Lindsay or Catherine, I'm going to leave their LinkedIn handles in the description. And if you're interested in the MLRC, I let you check out the website linked in the description. If you want to learn more about translanguaging and are interested in multilingual literacy, I invite you to follow the rest of this event. All the details are in the program that's linked in the description. Bye!